My name is Tim Healey. I'm currently the Associate Superintendent for Student Learning and Accountability for the school division. At the end of, on July 1, I transitioned into becoming the principal for the new high school, the 12th high school that's being built. It's a year planning. That school doesn't open until the fall of 16, but in that role, I hire and buy everything that's going to go in that building, including every chair, every textbook, every musical instrument, every uniform, and hire every single person except the cafeteria workers, but everybody else, every teacher, every secretary, everyone. And so that's what I do in the planning in the year. So this is my 26th year working in Prince William County schools. I came here right out of college as an English teacher at Woodbridge high school English teacher. Was an assistant principal at Osborne Park High School for a couple of years, and then was the principal there for 11 years, and then in this role for 4.5 now. We'll be 5 when I'm done. So I live in the community. I have 3 children, 2 high schoolers. I've written co-authored 2 books on the transition to high school, one for parents and one for students. I won't tell you about them because that would be a conflict of interest, and I don't want to be doing that. Just giving you a context of my... You could, yes. But just giving you some context of things that I have done. And then I recently defended my dissertation in September, and it was on the transition to 9th grade. So I've done a lot of work in this. The session today, though, is not a technical session. It's hopefully a practical session that gives you some practical tips on how to be a parent and how to have the knowledge to navigate this the best you can. And so for that, I really do, just like I said in the auditorium, thank you for being here and congratulate you for taking this step. It is a sacrifice to be here, and so I appreciate that you're doing that. The 9th grade transition is important, and that's, as you look at the things we'll cover in the next 45 minutes, I want to give you a little bit on the importance of 9th grade. You probably realize that because you're sitting here, but I want to just show you that and revalidate or reassure your thoughts on that, how important 9th grade is. I want to give you the 6 proactive steps you can take. These are, my co-author and I wrote these books, and they're centered around these 6 steps. I just touch upon them today. On 2 of them, I'll go into a little bit more depth, but I can't get into all the detail in the time we have. Give some specific tips for Prince William County high schools, and I'll weave that in throughout the whole presentation, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. If we run out of time with no questions, I'll stay here as long as anybody has questions afterwards. So here's our goal, right? We're moving our kids from these big 8th graders that show up in the halls of a high school to this day, the graduation day. And that's really our goal, right? We see these oh, my laser pointer's not working now. But we see these, I love this picture because it really shows these big middle schoolers that show up and trying to figure everything out. And then this day is, when I was a principal, I always thought this was the best day. Everybody's happy. Parents are happy. Kids are happy. It's a little sad for us as educators because we've watched these children mature and grow up for 4 years and then they go away. And so it's a little sad, but it's a good sad, because you've done your job. So that's really what your goal is, right? You want to help them get through this time of life to this time where they're a young adult ready up for the next stage of life. So let's talk about the 9th grade year a little bit. It's so important. The 9th grade year is so important. There are whole conferences, books, everything about the make it or break it year. Because everything points to the fact that if a kid is successful in 9th grade, they'll be successful in high school. If they're not successful in 9th grade, they start immediately in a deficit that's very hard to work out of. Okay? And so this is really important. Yes? Speak up? Yeah, I will speak up. I'm sorry. I'm usually loud. That's the first time anybody's told me I'm not being loud enough. So it's the make it or break it year, very important. And you can see the data point there. If they're on track by the end of 9th grade, they're 20 times more likely to graduate high school. And by on track, it simply means that they have enough credits to be considered a 10th grader. That's on track, okay? across the country, the largest cohort of children, the largest group of any grade level, kindergarten through 12th grade, is 9th grade. That's because some kids never get out of 9th grade. And then what happens is every year they're separated from their peers, their chances of dropping out of school goes up exponentially, greater and greater. And so they call this, as I said, this juncture so critically important that kids are successful to get through. It's not like elementary and middle school, okay? Yes, their kids get retained in those grades, but let's be honest, you haven't seen any 15-year-olds in 3rd grade. At some point, the age promotes kids up. That stops at 9th grade. There are 17-year-old 9th graders in our division. And they will probably most likely, unless something dramatic happens, end up being a dropout or getting a GED. So that's something that's a kind of an eye-opener for kids, that it's for real. Because through middle school probably, or maybe even 4th and 5th grade, their parents and counselors and teachers have said, if you don't pass, you're not going to get promoted. But eventually they get promoted. There's all sorts of research about the harm of not promoting kids, that retention really harms kids. But when you get to high school, it's about accumulating credits. It's just not like, hey, I'm 15, so now I'm a 10th grader. You have to have this many credits, pass this many classes. And that's kind of a shock to some kids, especially kids that are on the edge, because they've grown to be skeptical of what you're telling them, right? So that's really important for them to understand. These are, now high schoolers start at 14. I just have this up for illustrative purposes. But these 4 years are very important to high schoolers. They think these are important. I have 2 high schoolers. I can't tell them anything about high school because it's an important time for them. They don't totally understand the context that we do as adults, that life goes on. There's a whole bunch of years after age 15, 16, 17, 18. And I just stopped at 83 because not of a prediction of anyone or anything, but I ran out of space. And the thing that's important is that kids understand that the decisions you make in high school could impact all these other years. And sometimes you see kids make life-altering decisions in high school. And so it's important for them to understand that context and see this visual kind of to understand there's a lot more to life than just these 4 years. Hard for them to understand that at this age. I used to tell kids, you know, if you charted out your life and you get to high school graduation, that's the peak, that's the best thing you've accomplished at that point, right? I mean, that's significant. When we celebrate kids graduating high school, it is the thing that the strongest accomplishment they've made at that point. But for some kids, that's the highlight going forward. For others, it's a foundation to go do greater things. And so I would show them, so what will your life look like, right? We want it to be great foundation. I go on to accomplish bigger and better things. But for some kids, sadly, it's not. And all they do is go back and think about what they did in high school, all right? And we all probably maybe have fond or maybe not so fond memories of high school, but I hope we understand that that's not the pinnacle of life to get a high school diploma. Okay, here's why 9th graders commonly get overwhelmed. These are self-fulfilling prophecies in that they're all related, okay? They become overwhelmed by expectations, grades get low, they don't connect to their teachers, they become a disciplinary problem, I have bad attendance. The 3 things people look at immediately for 9th grade success: attendance, behavior, grades. Seems fairly common sense. And it is common sense. And I want you to think about this, all this together. When you think of your child transitioning to 9th grade, think of it in 3 categories. They have to be ready academically. They have to be, their social and emotional needs have to be addressed. And then procedurally, they need to know how to check out of the office, who to go see if they have a problem, how to work the locker, how to get on the right bus at the end of the day. These are all things that can be fairly intimidating to kids the first couple of weeks. The most intimidating time for a ninth grader on the first day of school is lunchtime. It's lunchtime because they're vulnerable. It's a big school. There are older kids who seem to all know each other, and they're looking around, and what they don't want to do is sit by themselves. They're scared to death about that. And so it takes a few minutes or sometimes a couple of days to kind of sort that all out. Very intimidating time for them. So you have to think of it in three categories. It's just not academic preparation. It's social emotional preparation and adjustment and how you're meeting that need and we're meeting that need, and procedural to understand. I'm going to say something about attendance very quickly. If you looked at the data in this school division, and I don't think our division is unlike many other divisions, if you looked at the data about the percent of kids that miss 10 or more days a school year, I think you would be a little shocked. It's a lot. It's a lot. Now, why is that important, especially in ninth grade? Look at number one. When you're absent and you miss work, at elementary school, we are much more nurturing about helping kids that miss school. At high school, we keep going. And it shifts to the responsibility shifts to the kid. Quite honestly, some of them are not ready for that responsibility. And so then what happens is I miss school, I get behind in grades, maybe I don't talk to the teacher keeps going, my grades go down, then what happens? When my grades go down and I get frustrated, I become a behavior problem. Because that's what kids do. When they get frustrated and they don't want to look bad in front of their peers, they act out. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So attendance is very critical, especially at the beginning of the year, for ninth graders in general. So I'm not saying there are always exceptions. Don't send your kid to school if they have the flu. I'm not saying that. But in high school, let's be honest, kids become a little bit more creative. I don't feel well. We got to be careful on that because it could be, and sometimes they don't feel well because they don't want to go to school, because they don't feel successful. They haven't made a connection, and so they don't feel well. So really be careful with that. Okay. This is I love this quote because it's me. I fully admit it to me. I remember sitting in church with my wife before we had children, looking at the family in front of us, and the kids were talking and misbehaving and crawling all over, and I'd be like, they have no control over their kids. And then I had kids, and I had no control over my kids in church. And so it's very real that there's no magic formula, like I said in the auditorium about this. There's nothing I can tell you to do this and everything will be okay. It doesn't work that way, and you just have to figure it out. I have seen in my experience parents who have been perfect, have done everything the exact same way, and child A runs cross country, gets straight A's, goes to UVA, and child B is a struggle every day to get to school and gets involved with things that they shouldn't get involved with. Parents have done the same thing. There could be other influences there. It could be influence of friends. My point being is it's a little bit of a struggle, and you just got to work through it. And I tell my wife all the time, again, one middle schooler, two high schoolers, we have our problems too. Even with all my experience, I have no experience or expertise at home, but even with all of that, we have frustrations as well. And I have to remind my wife, she puts a lot of pressure on herself. Every family behind their door is dealing with problems and issues. Everybody has their own problems. Everybody has their own issues. And you can't be so hard on yourself. You just got to say, hey, let's do something different. Let's try something different. And so just to keep that in mind, I just love that quote. So here are the 6 steps. We'll go through them quickly. And these, I think, will help you. I call these things, these are not guarantee steps. These are high probability steps. If you do these things, it helps give you a better probability that your child will be successful. No guarantees, but. So make a plan. Very simple. Not many 14-year-olds show up to high school knowing exactly what they want to do with their whole life. That's rare. Some kids do. But it's important to start having those discussions with kids. Here's why. In ninth grade, they start to build a written record about themselves. Now, some of them are taking classes in middle school that actually starts that written record. Algebra, Spanish, those things that are high school credit courses, they're building their written record there now. But when they're in eighth grade, you can still, if they falter, you can, as a parent, have that taken off their transcript. Well, in ninth grade, that doesn't happen anymore. That is a permanent written record of them, starting in ninth grade. 14-year-olds don't always understand that. So the discussion with your kid to say, where do you see yourself in 4 years? They're not going to know. But if it's, yeah, I want to go to a 4-year university, then they need to understand that from day one in ninth grade, they need to be on top of those grades. When I was a principal, I would interview seniors at the end of the year, not all 700 of them, but I would take about 25 and I would talk to them. And I would say, if you could give advice to younger students, what would it be? And 23 out of 25 almost every year would say, I would have taken my ninth grade year more seriously. Because it's one of those things they kind of realize after the fact. So it's very important that you have that discussion, like, where do you see yourself in 4 years? It's going to change. It's okay. But they need to understand about that permanent written record. Now, I use this math cartoon because to make a point about course selection. This is a very important document. It's the high school course catalog. It's online. This is this current year. There'll be a new, every year we produce a different one. I'm not saying go home and read this from cover to cover. Okay? It's online for access. This is how kids choose courses in high school. It's the course, every course offered in a high school in Prince William County is in this book. But there's also other really valuable information in here about dual enrollment, about how to get weighted credits for advanced coursework. We've now added a whole thing about preparing for college, about looking at graduates from Prince William County schools and kids that went to Virginia Tech, what was their average GPA. That type of data is in this booklet. And it's very important to, again, don't read it cover to cover, be familiar with it. Okay? And this helps you make your plan as a parent. I don't know that the child will read this, but as a parent, it helps you formulate that plan. Real example. Mathematics is kind of controversial in our county right now, especially at elementary, middle school level. Some folks believe accelerate, accelerate, accelerate. Give the kids more. Third grade, we want them doing fifth grade math. Get them to geometry in eighth grade. Some people believe, no, it's more important to have proper foundation and let them go through at a steady pace so they have good foundational knowledge of math so that when they get to calculus, they have that foundation. If you look nationally at the argument, you'll find 50% of the people that believe in acceleration and 50% of the people that say, pump the brakes, let them get the good foundation. Very controversial. We kind of let parents do their own thing. If you want to accelerate your kid, you can get them through geometry in eighth grade. Some kids that might be going to Thomas Jefferson or our own governor's school take this route. But here's what I'll tell you. If you take algebra in eighth grade, you can get to the most advanced course in mathematics we offer your senior year, calculus, AP Calculus BC. That is an extremely rigorous college-level course. You can do that if you're in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. There's no reason to accelerate faster than that. Now, do we have some kids that are like, if I say Doogie Howser, is that just like dating me? Do you guys know who Doogie Howser is? I always call those kids Doogie Howsers because there's always exceptions, right? There's always kids that are like off the chart brilliant, and so the standard rules don't always apply to those children. But for most kids, if they get to Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they're in a good spot. I'll tell you personally, my older son is a junior at OP. He took algebra in 8th grade. My daughter, she's a 9th grader at OP. I did not have her take algebra in 8th grade. She wasn't ready. I'm okay with both of those decisions. And it's got to be for your child like that. This catalog will help you with that type of planning. And I see that as sometimes intimidating. We have amazing counselors. Miss Orlick's back here. She was one of my counselors for many years at Osborne Park. She's the longest serving employee in Prince William County. 62 years in the county. And she'll tell you that, and my point is that we have counselors like Miss Orlick at all our schools that are very knowledgeable and can be great resources. However, they have way too many kids on their caseload. How many kids do you have on your caseload? 400 and some. And that's not unusual. That's not something to be proud of, but it's a reality. And so sometimes they just impossible to get the individual attention. And so as a parent, it's okay to take the initiative to dive into this, and this gives you the knowledge to do that. Also, when you're having this discussion with your child about goals and plans, let them visualize what they want to be. So sometimes 14-year-olds will say, I want to be a professional golf player. I want to play in the NBA. I want to go to Broadway. These are all goals that are okay, and kids should have those types of goals. So as a parent, don't say, that's ridiculous, you're never going to Broadway. You can't even sing. Don't say that. Say, that's great, we'll support you as much as we can, but let's have a backup plan, right? Let's have a backup plan. Because if you don't want to make it to Broadway, I don't want you living in my house till you're 50 years old, okay? So let's have a backup plan. So this is not a time you squash people's dreams, because you know what? We have kids in this county that have gone to Broadway, and we have kids in this county who play in the NFL. And so that does happen, very rarely, okay? So don't squash dreams at this point. That's not the goal here. Let them have that. Have a backup plan. It's a great discussion, great dinner time conversation. I have found with my kids, I have 3 kids, I can't have these conversations with all 3 kids in the room because they're sensitive to each other, or they make fun, or they make comments. So for our family, we have to have that one-on-one time with my wife, myself, and one child, that type of conversation. Just a thought. Some people have very open conversations with their families. We haven't gotten to that level yet. Okay, get organized is step 2. Again, you're like, yeah, that's obvious. If you think of a teenager's brain as this, now I'm hoping their room doesn't look like this. I'm using this to symbolize their brain, because teenagers' brains are not organized. They've got so much jumbled up in there, so much going on. Their priorities are not always your priorities. Or they may have priorities, but they just don't have them organized right. Okay? And so getting organized through all this helps you do this. Now, here's my point. You have to be proactive in helping them get organized as they come to high school. Simple protocols and procedures to help them get organized will benefit you greatly. This is what you want to do proactively, not when you get the first interim back and it's not at the level of where you think they should be, right? And then you say, well, we've got to put some things in place. This isn't going to continue. Do it the summer before they enter into 9th grade. Here's going to be our rules in our house. Here's a little tip. When we get a new teacher out of college, we tell that new teacher, as you start your classroom year, you want to be a little tighter on rules and responsibilities in your classroom. And then if the kids live up to it, you can loosen the reins a little bit. Because if you loosen it first and then try to tighten, it doesn't work. Kids rebel against that. And new teachers struggle with that a lot of times. Because they're like, oh, I'm young, I'm going to connect with them, they'll love me. Well, teenagers are teenagers. They'll love you, but they'll try to take advantage of you, right? And so then if a teacher tries to gain back control of his or her classroom, it can be a real power struggle. Same thing as a parent here. Establish these things before they go. If you find you're too tight, too many rules, and your kid is proving you that they deserve some more leeway, they've earned your trust, then it's very easy to loosen up your reins, but harder to do it reactively. Simple things like daily planner. We hope all our kids are using planners now. It doesn't always have to be a written planner too. Sometimes they can use a digital one. Kids, most of our high schools provide planners, and middle schools. Kids are getting used to this, but here's my point with this. What is your expectation at home for that daily planner? Do you view it every day? Do you view it once a week? Is it open for like in the kitchen for people to look at, or is it private? Those are family decisions, but these are part of the protocols that you have to establish. How about work at home? What's your protocol for that? Establish this before the first day of school. Is your son or daughter going to be allowed to do it in the room? Do they have to show you a completed project? Do they just have to not show you daily assignments, but just big assignments? When I grew up, my place was I did my work in the dining room table. That's where my parents wanted me. So I didn't have to be right in the kitchen, but I was like off to the side in the dining room, did my work in there. It's different. Sometimes it's different per kid, but it's things that should be established before. Big challenge in high school, there's no more teaming. Sometimes schools will have 9th grade teachers that try to team together, but you'll get teachers with very different expectations. Some will give a lot of homework, some won't give any homework. Some will allow makeup tests and redo tests, some won't allow that at all. And getting organized is kind of helping your kids understand those expectations. When you go to back to school night as a parent, you usually get that information, but be in tune with it. Be in tune with that. Okay? Time management is a big thing. There's lots of research out there now. It's been out there for a while. I don't mean that it just came out. Kids that are involved tend to have better time management than kids that aren't involved. I see that with my own self and my own children. My daughter played volleyball in the fall. She would come home from practice, do her homework, have dinner. Now she comes home and she goes to sleep. And then she eats. And then at 9 o'clock she's like, well, maybe I should do my homework. I'm like, yeah, maybe you should do that. So kids tend to be more organized when they're involved, but it's good to, again, talk through those expectations. Kids that are organized can manage all these things. And really the big deal at high school is they are balancing a lot of things. We live in a hyper-competitive area. Very competitive for college acceptance. Very competitive if your kid's in sports or music or drama, right? I mean, you know, you're paying money to have them do all this extra stuff, and very competitive. That can become very overwhelming for kids. It can become overwhelming for us as parents too. But so you have to try to make sure that kids are happy and healthy and balancing all that, and you can help them through those kind of protocols and procedures of being organized. I'm going to touch upon homework really quickly. Homework is a big issue in our county right now. It is nationally as well. We have tried to make a push at the central office that homework should be purposeful. It should be relevant, make real-world connections. It's not just homework for the sake of giving homework. It's just not giving worksheets. We've tried to value family time and tell teachers not to give homework over Thanksgiving, winter break. My kids had homework over winter break. It's my own issue. I'll deal with it. But my point is that, again, some teachers are buying into that philosophy. Some teachers aren't. Some parents are buying into that philosophy. Some parents are not. Some parents are like, my kid never has homework. I want more homework. Some parents are like, my kid's in dance, soccer, whatever. We have no time to do homework. And so as school officials, we're trying to balance all of that. So here's what I'll tell you. Every piece of research I've read on this, from kindergarten through 12th grade, the most important thing kids can do is reading. Reading, it doesn't always have to be, I'm a former English teacher. It doesn't have to be Hamlet. It's their choice of reading, okay? Kids will read if you give them that freedom to choose, and that's the most important thing. So how does this fit into this thing of being protocols and procedures? If you're a parent that believes you want your kid doing homework, and they come home from school and they say, I don't have any homework, that sometimes can frustrate you. You can get frustrated at the kid, you get frustrated at the school. So if you had a procedure in your house to say, you know what, every time you say no homework, then from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock is reading time. You're going to put the phone in the kitchen drawer and you're going to read. Just an idea. The research supports you if you do that, okay? So if it frustrates you if kids say, I don't have homework, and because some days in high school, again, living this as a parent, I've been a high school educator for many years, but living as a parent, I have days where my kids have no homework. I have days where they're up to 2 a.m. doing homework and everything in between. So if you're a parent that's like, I want that structure every day, have a protocol in place. If this is what we do when you tell me we have no homework, you're going to read. Just an idea. Step 3, get involved. There are tons of activities at schools for kids to be involved with. There is direct research out there in the 9th grade transition that a key factor in kids' success is making a healthy connection with 2 to 3 adults in the building. Clubs, activities, and sports support that. If they're involved with your church, community, that's a positive thing too. But transitioning to high school, I'm pushing the clubs and activities at school, okay? There's something for everyone at our schools, something for everyone. I had a parent a few years ago, saw me the spring before her child came, scared to death. Your school is too big. The older kids look like they're 35 years old. Her child was physically small. He was a small kid, shy. He was an introvert, very intimidated by all that. I saw her at back to school night. I said, how's it been going so far? She said, great. He got involved in marching band. Marching band starts in August before school starts. He made connections with other kids. The older kids looked out for him. On the first day of school, the band kids all sat together. He had a place to go. On the first day of school, he wasn't scared at all. She was still scared, but he was not scared. So again, sometimes you'll hear advice, well, when they go to high school, don't have them get involved in anything until they kind of figure everything out academically. I believe the opposite. I believe try to find a fall activity or club or sport or something to get involved with, because that's when they make those invaluable connections. Now, a parent in the last session made a great point to me. She said, you know, nobody tells parents when kids go to high school, if you want them to be involved, keep August open. Her child, she had a current 9th grader, and her kid wanted to do volleyball, I think it was, but nobody had told her volleyball practice start, because in middle school practices don't start till school starts. In high school, they start August 1st, about. And so they had scheduled family vacation for August, and that restricted her child from being able to go out for the team. She said, nobody told us that. So that's a good little nugget. I just never would have thought of that. It's important, okay? And those things will be advertised by the schools that you're going to in the spring. I mean, sometimes we make family vacations already, right? We've got places reserved and stuff. But just keep that in mind as you go into. Now, if it's a club or like student government, those things start when school starts. But band, cheerleading, dance, any fall sport, football, cross country, those things will start in August. Robotics, sea perch, I just put that in there to encourage. We've got all sorts of things. I put volleyball in there because my daughter's a volleyball player. Okay. The other thing I'll tell you is that the most savvy parents I saw got involved in the school in some way. Now, your involvement at high school does not end when you, as a parent. It changes. You're not going to be in the classroom reading to kids like maybe at elementary. You're not going to be helping the teacher organize folders in the classroom. That sort of doesn't happen at high school, but there's tons of opportunities to get involved in helping at high school. A few ideas. All of the schools have booster clubs. If your kid's involved in band or dance or music, any sport, booster clubs, great way to get involved. PTA or PTOs, they all have those. Advisory councils, they all have those. These are all great ways to get involved in the school, okay? And we found that those parents that are involved at school like that usually produce kids that are very successful. Not because they're following them around, right? But because they're there observing. They're there observing. They see how the staff interacts with kids. They see who their kid might be hanging out with. When things go wrong, and they will go wrong, they see how things react to. Did you question?
Yes. That's a great idea. We haven't practiced any club because my daughter has been transferred to middle school, and probably that she will be transferring to high school.
Mm-hmm.
So all these clubs are in the afternoon, and there's no transportation, or it's just restricted transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sometimes very hard, mostly for me that I'm a single parent, to get involved in all those things, and I would like her to be involved.
So his point, and it's a good point, is that sometimes he's a single parent. It's hard sometimes for transportation issues. Some schools do have limited activity buses on certain days. Those are things that are challenging. There's no doubt about it. I would say that the more you connect with the school, and your comfort level. What I'm about to say probably is your comfort level, right? Because whether you want other kids driving your kid, again, that has to be a personal decision that you're comfortable with. Other parents carpooling, that sort of thing. Certainly seen that where, you know, the neighborhood kind of divides up. You're going to pick up on this day, you're going to pick up on that day. So there are ways, but it's a challenge. I agree with you. I agree with you. All right, so that was my visual about PTA, concession stand. I'm going to skip that story for time. Form positive school relationships is step 4. So I had this parent years ago, Mrs. Stauffer, who I was talking one time to, and I made a point about not letting kids get lost in the shuffle. It was an audience like this, and she asked a question, and she said, "Well, what does that mean? What do you mean by don't get lost in the shuffle?" And I said, I didn't have a really good answer. I kind of said, well, you know, make sure they don't get, you know, fall through the cracks, lost in the shuffle. And she called me on it. Mrs. Stauffer was the type of parent who didn't accept answers that weren't good. And she said, you know, you're the school official. I'm a parent. You're supposed to tell me how to do this. And so it made me really think through my answer about that. And here's what it comes back to. Not falling through the cracks and not having your kid get lost in the shuffle. Make sure that they make a significant relationship at the school with other adults, a healthy relationship with an adult. That is really, really important, okay? That's how they don't fall through the cracks or get lost. That's how people look out for them in a large high school to make sure they're doing the right thing. For some kids, this happens very naturally. Some kids have personalities that connect with adults right away. It's really, they just have those kind of personalities. Some kids are introverted, and it does not happen. And you have to try to manipulate or work the system to make that happen. You know what Mrs. Stauffer did? She went behind the scenes, had the counselor call her daughter down randomly to have a discussion about something, randomly. Immediately had that counselor make a connection with her kid. As I said, our counselors have too many kids, and so sometimes that doesn't happen. And immediately tried to foster developing a relationship like that. Just took a step behind the scenes. Her daughter never knew. Maybe she knows now, but she didn't know at the time. And it helped foster that type of relationship. Now here's some tips for that. When you make contact at the school, make sure that the first contact is positive. A tip we give new teachers, well, we give any teacher really, just not new teachers. Try to make positive contact with parents towards the beginning of the year. When do parents usually hear from the school? When things are bad, right? And so if you make a little effort to reach out to parents sometime over the course of the beginning of the year in a positive way, then when you do have to contact for parents for a not so great thing, they are more open to that. And so the same thing goes for you as a parent. High school teachers have 150 kids mostly. And so you're not going to get the same individual attention you might have gotten at elementary when they have 25 or 26 kids. It just can't happen. But if you reach out to the teacher and say, hey, at dinner time, our son was talking about what he learned in your class. It sounds really good. Thank you for doing that.
Like an email?
An email, reach out. Yeah, absolutely. Back to school night, you mentioned something. Any of those. That immediately puts your kid and you on the teacher's radar, right? And so, number one, the teacher's going to kind of keep an eye out because now I've made this connection. Number two, when your kid comes home to complain about something, now you've already reached out to that teacher in a positive way, and so when you contact the teacher to ask about whatever, you have an ally there instead of like a defense mechanism. Okay? Now, talking about email, yes, Ms. Orlick. Sure. That's right. See, good ending to that story. All right, so, oh my gosh. I may go 5 minutes long, but if you've got to go, just go. I mean, don't go yet. You're not allowed to go yet, but I'm going to try to go a little quicker. I apologize. So don't use email for negative issues. Here's what I'll just give you a quick little anecdotal evidence. I remember teacher walking into my office saying, look at this email this parent sent me. They said I'm a terrible teacher and I don't care about their kid and blah, 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 blah. Well, I know why that kid acts the way he does now. You know what I mean? And so now I have to immediately repair a deficit relationship. So email is good for some reasons, but it's also given people a chance to immediately respond to things when things are very emotional and raw. And so as a parent, when your kid comes home and says a teacher's done something, yelled at them, it's hard not to get your emotions. It happens to me. It's hard not to get, but when I did that to my parents, they probably A, didn't believe me, but B, they slept on it. They put a little perspective on it. Okay, is this the end of the world? Do I need to get involved with this? And then if they did get involved, it was in a more logical manner. Now, what do people do? They go to their computer and they hit those keys so hard and they write something probably they don't want to write with tone, and then the teacher gets upset, and now we're trying to repair bad things. So contact the teachers if something is concerning to you. I'm just warning you against the email. It's easy and convenient and may make you feel better when you hit send, but it's going to do some damage on the other end. Just a thought. Don't contact high school teachers every day. They have 150 students, period. I won't go into more of that, okay? Well, the term helicopter parent really developed in colleges because parents now are getting involved at college level and contacting colleges, contacting professors. But you just want to think, we use this term with our English teachers, with our students. Think of it as a gradual release of responsibility from 9th grade to 12th grade. They're 14 in the 9th grade. You're there as a parent, but your goal by the time they're 18 is that release of responsibility. You want them to be able to advocate for themselves. So be very careful with that. I'm not saying don't get involved with issues. Just a high school teacher can't contact you every single day, with exception. Every once in a while we've had a kid that needs that type of interaction, but certainly couldn't do it for 150 people. Short follow-up notes. This can be email. You meet with a teacher. Teachers met with 10 different parents. If you want to just kind of document your conversation,
Good morning. Again,
ignore Ms. Custard right now.
Thank you so much for coming. This concludes session 2, and it also concludes our parent summit. Please be sure to complete your evaluation form. You may leave it with the presenter in this session, or you may drop it off on your way out of the main entrance. Please also know that you have a few extra minutes if you like to visit with the counselors in the Commons. There are counselors available for each high school. Again, thank you so much for coming and enjoy the remainder of your weekend. This concludes our parent summit.
So I'll be done in 5 minutes, but if you have to go, I won't hold it personally against you, unless you're coming to the 12th high school. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. All right, so quickly, you go in for a conference. Here's how you start the conference to treat school staff as partners. Mr. Healey, I want you to know at the end of this conference, my goal is that we are on the same page and we can move forward so my kid can be successful in your class. Now, tell me why you yelled at them. I'm just making something up. If you go in immediately loaded for bear at the beginning of a conference, the teacher immediately becomes defensive. The principal or assistant principal immediately feels like they have to defend the teacher. You're not going to get stuff done. If they know at the beginning of the conference, hey, my end game here is not to have you fired. My end game is so my kid can be more successful in your class. How do we get there together as a team? Teachers will be a lot less defensive and willing to work with you to get to that point. All right, this is my best one, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. I tell people that when I turned 18, we had a curfew in my house at midnight all the way through, even in college when I came home from college, midnight, okay? So when I turned 18, it was the summer after my senior year, I did not come home at midnight. I thought I was 18 and an adult. When I came home a little later than midnight, my mom was sitting at the table crying like I was being sent to federal prison, and my father was very angry. He said, let's sleep on this, we're going to talk about it in the morning. When we talked about it in the morning, he said to me, Tim, nothing good happens after midnight. After midnight is when good people make bad decisions. After midnight is when good people make bad decisions. His point was very clear that even though I was 18, I was in their house and I was still expected to follow by their rules. I see sometimes some parents, in my experience, give up their supervision because their kids have gotten to high school. You got to be very careful with this. Now, this is very personal to each family, and you have to make those decisions that's right for you and your family. I'm not advocating midnight curfews for people. That's just my point of my story. But you have to make the decision that's best for you. So there's bad news and good news with your kid going to high school. The bad news is that your job isn't over. And here's a few suggestions how to continue your job. This research just came out about dinner, the power of dinner time. It didn't just come out, excuse me. It's been out for a long time. A new study just came out to say that kids that eat regular dinner with their families 4 times or more a week are a lot less likely to make bad decisions, get involved in smoking, get involved in drugs and alcohol, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's very clear research. Now, what I don't want you to do is look at this picture and get intimidated. There's lemon in the glasses here. There's a flower on the table. There's eye-to-eye contact. She's got a necklace and beautiful makeup and whatever. This does not mean your dinner has to look like this. Sometimes dinner in my household is Tony's Pizza on the table. It's more, the conversation is more important than the presentation, and the priority of family time is important, quite honestly. Okay? It's a huge, big issue. Clear rules for school nights. 2 things on this one. Weekends. Be very careful if your 9th grader connects with older kids off the bat. I've seen young kids, very athletically gifted, make varsity teams. That's great, but it also means their social group now has become 12th and 11th graders. Is it good for 14-year-olds to be with 17 and 18-year-olds? Maybe, but it could be an area you need to be observant of. Okay? The other thing is, I'll tell you to guard against, I've lived this myself, be careful of the sleepover in high school, right? Sleepovers are all the rage, especially for younger kids. When they get to high school, you need to be guarded with that. I've heard tons of stories of sneaking in and out of house, boys sneaking into girl sleepovers, kids getting into stuff in the house that maybe should just be for the parents. So you need to be cautious of it. I'm not saying don't do this or that, just something to be. The time after school is the most unsupervised time in America. We sometimes now default like, hey, my kid, they're not in 2nd grade now, they can come home by themselves, they can get food, but it is the most unsupervised time in America, so be careful with that. This is obvious, and this is what I'll say. When kids are in times of decision making, critical decision making between about decisions, the 2 most influential groups, research has proven, are their peer group, their friends, and their parents. So sometimes kids will act like they're not listening to you, but just like this picture shows, they really are. They might tell you you don't know what you're talking about. They may tell you they're not listening to you. They may turn your back on you, but they are listening to you. That's what the research says. So don't give up on that. Okay? Very important. All right, we'll go on. Very important. Don't let your child compare you to other parents, and if they do, ignore it. My son went to a New Year's Eve party with some friends. He's a driver, but I did not allow him to drive that night. So I said, well, I'm going to let you stay out a little later than your curfew because it's New Year's Eve, but I'm going to come pick you up. He said, Dad, I don't want you driving on New Year's Eve. I'll just spend the night. And I said, well, thank you very much for being so considerate, but I will still pick you up. And he said, but everybody, all the other parents are letting their kids spend the night. Well, when I showed up there to pick him up, there was all the other parents there picking up the boys. Guess who was spending the night? The girls. So he had volunteered to spend the night in a house full of girls. So, but he immediately threw that pressure on me. Every other parent's letting their kid do it. Well, the other parents weren't doing it. So the parents of the girls did. All right. Good news is high school is a great time. All these pictures I was going to make little points on. Lifelong friends. They mature. They can be silly. High school is a great, exciting time. So do some great things. And I'll conclude with this. Try to attend many events you can at the school, not only events that your kids are involved with. Even if you're not a football fan, I encourage you to go to the first game of the year with your kid. Let them go off with their friends, but don't just drop them off. You want to attend and observe, not just your kid, but observe the whole thing. Remember, at big high school events, the high school administrators won't supervise your kid as much as maybe they do at middle and elementary. And you have to kind of get a feel for how that happens at your school. Okay? They just can't. The events are too big. A little hint I tell people is don't give your kid money. They'll get hungry and they'll come to you. It'll be a natural check-in point where they'll say, can I have some money for the concession stand? And they'll come see you. So just a thought on that. I really encourage that. It sends the message that you're not checking out on them and that you're going to be involved with the school. Okay? And it's a great thing for kids. Some kids aren't sports fans, I get that. But football games and other things are more about the event and the social part of it and the band, and it's a lot of fun. So I encourage you to be a part of that. I've learned more about my kids' friends just listening. Don't force these conversations. Like, tell me, why is his hair so long? You know, that's not what you want to say. But they will volunteer that stuff naturally. Be listener and don't be judgmental. Be judgmental in your inside. But if you say, oh, Johnny, told his mom to shut up, you better not say anything to me to shut up, and I don't want you hanging around Johnny anymore. I wouldn't react that way. You might think that, but if you react that way, they'll shut down and they won't talk as much. So just let them dialogue, and you'll learn tons about just listening, especially when their friends come over. They will talk. They forget you're even there. My kid has friends over in the basement to watch movies. They don't understand. I can hear every word they say just standing upstairs because they talk so loud. They're not thinking. So I've learned so much. All right. And I went into some specific tips here in high school, but it was really, I think I've interwoven a lot of those points throughout here. This is a big thing. When you're planning, look at the coursework involved at your school. Colleges, I talked to the JMU admissions counselors. They don't necessarily look at grade point averages as much as they look at rigor of schedule. Did your kid take challenging courses, and are they doing well? They don't even look at a GPA. JMU doesn't look at a GPA, and they completely cross off courses they don't think are academically focused. So each school does things a little differently, and I've put a footnote up there. There's tons of information on college websites now, more available, and you can do all that research. But that's really important in figuring things out, going through that. And really? Yep. Well, there you go. So each university does things a little different. The one thing I will say that JMU, and I think most of the Virginia universities are like this, the local universities really know our schools. They know down to the level of the rigor of a teacher in certain schools. So they really know the schools well and the courses, so that's interesting. Yes, sir?
When do the kids decide their course schedule
for ninth grade? So they'll, the high schools usually go out to their middle schools? Next month. And that's typical even when they're in high school. Usually in February-ish, they'll decide their courses for the following year because it takes that long for the school to get the master schedule all worked out and stuff. Yes? Question?
My question is, can the parents know a child decision about the program they would like to pursue in college?
Mm-hmm.
As a parent, maybe my child say, Dad, I would like to be an engineer.
Uh-huh.
I should know you can be an engineer. Can I ignore his choice?
Can you, when he goes to college, can you ignore his choice? Is that what you're asking?
When, maybe before going to college, maybe he has decided to become an engineer.
Uh-huh.
And you say, no, I would like you to be like, to do this. Is it good to ignore his...
Okay. So his question is, his kid has one goal basically, and he wants to lead him in a different direction basically. Is that good? The answer to that question is it's a very personal family question. I would suggest as a general statement that it would be good to approach that way just like I suggested earlier, which is I would support if a kid wants to do something like that, but also have your backup plan there ready. I think when they're teenagers, if you put a direct, no, you can't do that, I mean, unless it's something unsafe or illegal, but when you do that, the tendency is that they will find a way to rebel against that some way. So it really would be, in my opinion, again, this is a personal kind of family dynamic, but in my opinion, it's better to try to understand his logic and why he wants to do that, and then also say, okay, well, let's also be prepared for this kind of plan as well. There was another question. Yes?
If the specialty program applications are due, I think they were due in February or maybe sometime early this month, and you don't have a decision yet whether you got into the program, how are you planning your high school courses?
So in general, like in 9th grade, you're going to plan your courses where your base school is. Some of those are generic courses like 9th grade PE, English, social studies. And then there'll be 1 or maybe 2 courses that are specific to a specialty program that adjustment will be made once it's confirmed that you're going to that specialty program. Okay? Any other questions? I'm sorry I rushed through the end, but I'll stay here if anybody has any other questions. Thanks. Have a great day.